across K-12 STEM, and we've also been developing new guiding questions. Today we're going to take some time to reflect on what we've learned and to make meaning out of all the information that has been shared. This will be followed by a town hall where we want you to share your thoughts, reflections, and your takeaways. You'll have an opportunity to tell us about your breakthroughs to help us better communicate why the STEM+C program is important and should be a priority. We will then have some time for our reflections and closing remarks by NSF program officers and by Arlene Destruel, the STEM+C program head. And now we have some announcements.
So the first announcement is a special issue that's coming out that we'd like to give you a quick preview of. Irene Lee led the editorial board for this special issue, and some of us joined her as co-editors. It is on STEM+C integration. Several of the projects funded by the STEM+C program are represented in this special issue, and the articles cover a gamut of important topics, grade spans, curricular and analytic approaches, and various STEM disciplines. So we hope you will enjoy that issue and look out for it. In terms of other announcements, we've shared a Google Sheet in the notes-taking folder that lists all the shareable assessment and measurement tools that folks have used on their projects or created for their projects that they think might be useful for others. So please add to that sheet so that we have a shared corpus of measurement tools that we could reuse. Also, please upload your slides for your presentations to the shared folder in the notes-taking folder. And as a heads up for today, as Irene said, it's a time for meaning making, so use your time, writing time effectively, post your own reflections on individual notes pages. And this has been a different kind of PI meeting. We've attempted to sort of make it more meaningful for everybody here, and feedback is truly appreciated. If you don't have time to complete the evaluation before you leave, please do so within the next couple of days. We plan to end by 11:30 this morning to allow time for checkout and to get your bags. Lunch will be available starting at noon. And now I'd like to introduce Joyce Malyn-Smith to start our morning session. Thank you.
Okay, so I'd like to get us started with our morning activity. We'll be working in this first session on what we're calling meaning making, and we already heard a little bit about what will be going on today, but let me walk you through how the activities will take place this morning. The first thing we're going to do is allow a little bit of time, maybe 15 minutes, for all of you to really begin to think back on what we've done over the last 3 days. And to start that, we're going to give you some time to go back up to the walls and take a look at the output from the different groups that met on Monday. Remember, we met together, we reviewed evidence, we talked about what was being learned in the meeting. So this will give you a chance to go back and remember what was discussed in your group and to see what was discussed in other groups. The reason why we're doing that first is that the second part of the meeting, this will only be a few minutes, maybe 15 minutes, the second part of the meeting, we're going to ask you to sit with your teams, with your project teams at tables, and to think about what is it that we've learned as a team throughout the past 3 days, and what is it that we might be doing differently now based on what we've learned and what we've heard from others. And to think about that, have a few minutes to talk about that, not a long time, maybe another 15 minutes or so. And during that time, we would encourage you to take some notes. Remember, we had a little format for you to be able to write your individual reflections over the last few days. If you've been doing that all along, that's great. If you haven't, this will give you time to actually sit down and write some reflections, because we're hoping by the end of the morning you'll feel comfortable enough to upload those reflections to share with the community and others who will be trying to figure out what has been learned through these 3 days. So we'll give you about 10 minutes maybe or so after the gallery walk to 10 or 15 minutes after the gallery walk to talk in your teams, and then a few minutes to actually write down some of your thoughts, not only to perhaps post later, and this can be anonymous, posting later, or you can put your name on it with your project number, depending on how you feel about the things you want to share and the insights that you've had. And then also to have you organize your thinking when we have the town hall later in the morning. So after that individual thinking time and reflecting time takes place, and you've had a chance to talk in your teams and to jot down some of your ideas, that will be followed by a panel where the synthesizers, and those are people who have been charged from the beginning of this program to wander from session to session, to ask you your opinions and to ask you about your insights, to have them report back to you what they've heard, both individually and collectively. So we'll have a panel where we hear back from them about what they heard, about what's being learned, not as much individually from projects, but as a community, as a STEM+C community. It sounds like a lot, doesn't it? But it will go very well, very fast-paced, and we'll be done. I hope we're done by 11:30, because I heard there's a big demonstration, worldwide demonstration today, and I'm hoping that that's not going to interfere with anyone's getting anywhere right after we're done this morning. So, did other people hear about that? It's national. What is it? National. National Global Climate Change Protest Day. So it'll be an interesting day in Washington, I'm sure. So after we have the panel and people have reflected back on what have we learned as a community, we'll have a short question-answer time where you can ask the panel questions about how they came to their conclusions, or those kinds of things, that whatever you'd like to ask them. After that very brief question and answer time, we'll open it up to a town hall where we'll ask you as principal investigators to be able to get up and share some of your own insights of what have you thought about, what have you reflected on, how has this changed what you might do. We'll ask program officers also who've been part of this discussion over the past few days, what have you heard, what are your impressions of what has been learned by the community, and what is the importance of this. So we'll have that town hall meeting, and all of these activities are designed to conclude at 11 a.m., and then at 11, Irene will come up and give some of her final remarks and her own reflections on where we are and where we're going. So that's the way the morning is planned. Why don't we begin? I'm going to set my timer on my phone, and why don't we begin with 15 minutes of getting up and walking around and trying to think about and remember how we began 3 days ago, when we were thinking about evidence and what it is that's been learned through STEM-C and our individual projects in the 6 groups that we met with on Wednesday afternoon. So let's start that. 15 minutes, please, and then if you can come back to tables and sit with your project teams.